What's going on, y'all? Welcome into Believe in Kentucky, part of the Believe Network. My name is Vinny Hardy. My guy Cole Park is not going to be in today, but we got a big time guest in here. Stopping by to drop a little knowledge about the Cats. You hear him on KSR. Got his own stuff on YouTube, shows and podcasts. Regular guest on the Leach Report with the voice of the Cats, Tom Leach. Talking about Brandon Ramsey, does his thing for KSR. Brandon, man, appreciate you taking time to hop on the pod today. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Certainly, always enjoy an opportunity to talk about the Cats, whether things are going good or bad. Good to chop it up about the blue and white every once in a while. So
For sure, for sure. So before we get into that, with the good and the bad, as all of us know, just for our listeners, man, what's a little background about Brandon Ramsey? I know you coach. Where you from? What's going on, your journey, all that kind of stuff. Not trying to get all in your business, but just a little knowledge.
yeah. Nobody hate me for this, but I'm a born and raised Hoosier. Spent pretty much my whole life in Indiana, but have also essentially been a lifelong Kentucky fan. Just didn't go the IU route like a lot of people in my area, and just chose to be a Kentucky fan. But from a pretty young age, I knew I wanted to get into coaching. So right out of college, I was able to get a couple of different coaching jobs. I was an assistant Division III basketball coach for 6 years. So that was my first real job. So didn't do anything else until I was almost 30 years old. And then I had done some intern work with KSR when I was in college. And pretty much as soon as I got out of coaching, I messaged Tyler Thompson and was like, "Hey, I'd love to, be able to come back and help out in any capacity I could." So was able to start back up with them. Also now run a scouting service for the state of Indiana. So I'm connected with college coaches all over the country that are trying to recruit Indiana high school kids. I'm one of the guys that you talk to if you're trying to do that. So, still very involved in the basketball space, not just with what I do with KSR and my own YouTube channel, but, talking with college coaches about prospects and those sort of things. So lucky to still be very heavily involved in something I love doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So the Hoosier route, and they had no idea. Which there's several that cover the Cats, like Justin Rowlands, like in Missouri. You're in Indiana. I'm born and raised in Kentucky. Like I was telling you before we started, I'm outside of Knoxville. Nothing orange about me, but yeah. So that's awesome, man. So coaching, you say you coached for 6 years, D3.
Yeah,
that's cool. That's cool. So, and I always wanted to do it. So you got the eye for it. So what was Brandon Ramsey's coaching style like? Let's go ahead and get that.
Yeah. Obviously, as an assistant coach, you don't really necessarily get to, put your full philosophy in there, but you start to shape your own philosophy, via the people that you work for. And, I worked for, actually my coaching tree would probably go up towards like Bruce Pearl. Actually, what the head coach I worked for at Wabash College, coached for Coach Pearl when he was at University of Southern Indiana. So we took a lot of stuff from Coach Pearl and what he does. Obviously, some high tempo, but also very kind of in your face defensive styles. But yeah, I mean, we were very heavy, I would say, on like game preparation and film breakdown stuff, which is why I do a lot of what I do today. We would spend a lot of time on scouting reports and those sort of things, and that's kind of what I grew to really like doing. I enjoy sitting around and cutting up film and kind of getting on the nerd side of the game, and a lot of that comes from the people that I worked for in terms of really diving into the preparation of basketball. So yeah, it's been neat to be able to kind of bring some of that into the media, so to speak. I'm not at the game. I'm not covering it in the same ways that some of the Rowlands or the Jack Pilgrims or the Herald Leader, like those people. Like I'm not credentialed and sitting courtside and all that kind of stuff. But I like to kind of try to bring that the coach's eye and a more analytical film breakdown sort of style to the fan base, because I think Kentucky fans are they're really smart. A lot of them want some information like I'm giving out, and then two, I think it can be valuable to provide some context to maybe the average fan that doesn't necessarily see what the ball screen coverage is like or why you ran this offensive play or different things. And I've been able to develop a little bit of a niche with trying to fill some of that void, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, it's a definite need for that. And look, you know Kentucky, they consume everything, all things cats. So you definitely put out information that everybody wants to get insight from and learn from. Before we get into the cats, you're a coach. You're in Indiana. I'm from Kentucky. Everybody knows how passionate both states are about basketball. I remember the first time I was in Indiana, we were going because a friend from Kentucky had moved up there. They were getting married. So we drove all the way up through to like Gary. We were going all Indiana. And I'm like, okay. So I'm seeing, a lot of farmland, a lot of cornfields, a lot of barns, but I'm seeing basketball goals on every barn. I'm like, whoa,
Absolutely.
like they like basketball just as much as we do. I'm like, okay, okay. I'm just a kid, just observing, riding in the car. I'm old, so there was no phones and no, it was just radio, and I'm like, oh, they like hoops just as much as us. So that was kind of
Absolutely.
my reflecting back on that trip is what I took from it. Um, so as a coach, growing up liking basketball in the state of Indiana, what's the scouting report on Brandon Ramsey as a player? What was your game like?
All right. Well, this actually this makes the story even more interesting. So I was actually a baseball player in college. I was
Oh,
not a
okay.
basketball player. I was self-aware enough from a pretty young age, I think, that I knew basketball wasn't going to be my future, at least in terms of getting to play at the next level. So I at a pretty early age really gave up playing, but I still was always around. Our high school teams. I was like I did a lot of the statistics and all that kind of stuff, and was always involved. So I think that's probably what drew me to the coaching side of things too. Was that I
Mm.
wasn't necessarily playing, but I was always on the sidelines, like had roles in practice, doing different things. But yeah, I grew up mostly being a baseball and a tennis player, actually, and then
Oh, cool.
went on and played baseball at Hanover College, and then was able to get a student assistant basketball job while I was there through some of the scouting stuff that I had started to do at that age, kind of on my own in college. I was running a scouting service at the time then as well, and that was sort of my in. So scouting report on me as a player, very bad, but I was a decent enough catcher to be able to play some college baseball. But yeah,
Cool.
so there isn't a whole lot to talk about with Brandon Ramsey basketball career.
There you go. So favorite player, even though you're a bad player, favorite player, college and pro growing up as a kid.
Oh, growing up, I mean, in Indiana, it's hard for it to not be Reggie Miller. That was
Okay.
probably the first guy that I really fell in love with watching. This, the passion that he brought. Those are some really good Pacers teams back in the mid to late '90s into the early 2000s. Certainly one of the first guys I can remember watching. I think everybody at some point, obviously, is a Michael Jordan fan. Hard not to be when he was at the end of his career. I was able to catch sort of the end of his career, probably from Kentucky. Like one of my first favorite players that I then ended up following into the NBA was Rajon Rondo. I was a huge
Mm-hmm.
Rondo fan, and closely followed his NBA career through all his different stops. So I would say probably those guys are the sort of the early on memories that I have, or watching a lot of those guys.
Yeah, that's everybody. Yeah, Reggie's a good one, a legend, and Rondo, of course, down here, man, was
Right.
unbelievable. I don't know, you might be too young, but the Bulls fans still think Reggie pushed off on that shot in Game 7. I'm sure
Right.
the Pacers fans like, nah, man, we good. Reggie
Yeah.
was fine. So these cats, from your coach's eye, if you could describe them in one word, I'm gonna give you two options. If you can describe this season, watching the Cats from the coaching perspective in one word, what would you say? And then in 5 words or less, what would you say?
My one word would probably be inconsistent, and I would probably add two more and just say "and frustrating." But and those sort of go hand in hand. But yeah, I think a lot of it just comes with, like, I've said it all season long, really, that this team is they're good, but we all know they're not great. And like, and good is even relative. Like, they're good compared to other average college basketball teams. They're not good compared to the history of Kentucky. We know that. But I've said really since like early January, I think this is a team that is somewhere between 20 and 30, 25 and 35 in the country. And teams that are like that, they're probably those things that I said. They're inconsistent and they're frustrating. And, we're just not very used to teams like that at Kentucky, and we don't accept them very well. So, Big Blue Nation gets very upset with some of those inconsistencies. But unfortunately, I think it's kind of par for the course with teams that are kind of at the level that Kentucky is this season.
Yeah, yeah, that's can't argue with any of that. You flash back to Auburn, and your your margins of error is too thin to overcome. Say what you want about the call on Colin Chandler. You shouldn't have been in that position, and you're up in 8 or 9, and then next thing you know, it's tight. I mean, that's it in a nutshell, basically. The Georgia game,
Right.
just,
Yeah, we've had several of these games now where in close games at the end, I mean, even thinking back, obviously to Missouri that you let slip away, North Carolina at home. Some of these games now it's kind of starting to stack up where tight games at the end when Kentucky has a chance to win or a chance to lose, it hasn't necessarily been a strength of Kentucky's to close out some of these games. And you're right, yeah. I mean, you shouldn't end up with that game being in the officials' hands. I mean, I tweeted out a couple clips today of 2-on-1 fast breaks that Kentucky just can't convert, and you end up getting your shot blocked on one, you miss two layups on another one. You still, I mean, too many sloppy turnovers in this game. Colin Chandler had 5 turnovers, several of which were just kind of unforced and unnecessary. So yeah, you certainly have opportunities along the way where you need to be able to put games away like that in order to reach any sort of the goals that you have on the season. And it's hard to beat teams like Auburn on the road when you make some of those mistakes that Kentucky continues to make. Even as we're here entering into the final stretch of the season.
yeah, yeah, and this isn't being negative for those listening and watching. We definitely appreciate it. This is just kind of calling it like you see it, and there's just been a lot of stuff that you got to kind of be critical about. It's been that type of year, uh, and we've seen it. And nobody who's one to watches every episode, we appreciate it. Would a full roster would it be different? Yeah, for sure. But I still think Saturday you still won. It shoulda, coulda, woulda, but put them away, finish, even with the 3 guys out, you still could have won that one. You had Auburn on the ropes, and you just didn't. You let him off the hook. Does Denny Green? You had him, we let him off the hook.
Yeah. I mean, there's just too many games over the course of this season now where like you said, you've let them off the hook. You Kentucky is very close to having an even better resume than they still kind of have, even though overall it's 17-10. But there's not a whole lot of teams with Kentucky's overall record that have wins like neutral site against St. John's, at Tennessee, at Arkansas. So you do have some of those high level wins, but man, you're so close to erasing a couple of the the bad losses at home, Missouri and Georgia. Then if you could have picked up one like this, I mean, man, that resume can really flip around in a hurry. And it's frustrating too when Kentucky had put themselves in a position after winning 8 out of 9, like you were legitimately competing at the top of the SEC, and now you had a couple of these go the wrong way by just such a thin margin. And I think looking back on the season, that's just going to make some of these things even more frustrating when you realize how close you were. And absolutely, yeah, I mean, injuries have played a big role. I mean, heck, they played a big role in both the Coach Pope seasons so far. I mean,
Yeah.
injuries have been a major storyline, but you lose a little bit of the grace you would get for the injuries when obviously that NIL number gets leaked and everybody's talking about that before the season, and you kind of feel like, well, if you're going to spend all this money, you should be able to overcome some of those things, and there's some truth to that, and some of that's probably unfair at the same time. But yeah, it's been just been a tough season, I think, for all of us. I mean, I think it's probably been tough for the players and the coaches. It's been tough for the fans. It's been tough for the media. But at the end of the day, we all just want Kentucky to be good and win the games.
Yeah. Uh, like I said, I was older. I'm 48, so there wasn't all the analytics and stuff as a kid there are now. and diving in and all that. But my barometer that I did as a kid, in the 90s, Kentucky was always playing, of course, Tennessee twice, Louisville, Indiana, and North Carolina. Those five for a good little while were on the schedule every year.
Mhm.
And I was like, if Kentucky goes 4-1, 5-0 in those five, they're usually set up to have a good year because those teams were pretty good. Even when Tennessee wasn't, it was always hard to win in Knoxville, and it was always tough. Indiana, Kentucky, about that.
Mhm.
This year, Kentucky went 3-2 in those five because we played all five. Swept Tennessee, but it took everything to get both of them. Beat Indiana, lose to North Carolina, and Louisville.
Mhm.
So we're 3-2 in those five, and we've had an up and down roller coaster type season. So that was just I thought back. I'm like, my little barometer from a teenager to
Still
now
works.
still
Yeah.
kind of applies. So
Yeah, that's interesting, and honestly, it goes back to the conversation we were just having too. I mean, that North Carolina game is probably the swing game there this season. I mean, the Louisville game, it got competitive there at the very end, but for the most part, at least on that night, it was pretty clear that Louisville was better than Kentucky in that one game. I'm not saying that it couldn't be different if you played them again, but like Kentucky probably should have won that North Carolina game. Then all of a sudden, you are 4-1, which is closer to your barometer for a little bit better team. But just like we've been saying, closing out those games has been tough for Kentucky this season, and I think it's a big reason why we find ourselves 17-10 instead of having a chance to be 20-7 or something like that right now. It's just that those one or two possessions per game to really put some people away. Kentucky just doesn't seem to have that gear this year that's needed to take that next step.
there's been some comparisons to which Pope's second year, Cal's second year, and that team couldn't buy a win on the road. They struggled to late in the season, got it together, make a run all the way to the national championship game against UConn. Nobody says that this team will look different in the NCAA tournament. The 2014 team wasn't getting blown out like this team is. They didn't have a 35-point loss to Gonzaga. They weren't down 20 to Louisville for stretches of the game. Do you see this team? Anything's possible, but do you see them getting it together and putting out a good story and making a run, or is it? It's hard to say, but we're talking for the sake of talking.
Right. Do I see them making a run like 2011? No.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, in fairness, I'm sure if you could go back and ask all of us in 2011, do you see yourself doing that? We would have said no just as quickly. So, again, I mean, it's just the way tournament. We've seen a lot of really crazy things happen. Anything is 100% possible. Yes, but I think that to me, for this team, I would be very happy. Like if they make a second weekend, I would be very happy. Now, again, that comes with the caveat of like, no, that doesn't mean I'm accepting a new level of Kentucky. It doesn't mean that that's the standard and it would be okay forever. But for this team, if they make a Sweet 16, I think that they've got some things figured out and they had a couple good wins in the NCAA tournament. That would be good to see for this team because you're right. I think that the seasons were built differently. I just pulled up that 2011 schedule and they lost by 17 early to UConn, but then their other losses are 2 points, 7 points, 2 points, 2 points, 2 points, 4 points, 1 point in overtime, and all those games are on the road. So like, yeah, they were losing, but man, those were coin flip games that could have gone either way. And we just got done talking about Kentucky's had a couple coin flip games this year, but they also got the doors blown off by Vanderbilt, by Alabama, by Gonzaga. Michigan State wasn't very competitive. The Louisville game, for the most part, wasn't super competitive. So no, I think these teams are just different in that aspect. And yeah, to me, I would be pleasantly surprised with a Sweet 16. Anything beyond that would like kind of shock me, quite frankly.
Yeah, and it's we're not at practice and all that kind of stuff, but just the vibes that are giving off, it feels like there's a lot more climbing and reaching and clawing and scrapping to get to where they can make a run because we're not like, oh, they're just not getting over the hump. Now, the women, on the other hand, we can kind of say, well, Channing Key's been hurt, and they've just lost to Vanderbilt by 1 and lost to Vanderbilt by 2 and lost to Tennessee by 3. They're right there. I don't feel the same vibes about the men's team like we did in 2011.
Right. No, I completely agree, especially with the injury issues. I mean, save for maybe getting Cam Williams back for a tournament run, there's not a whole lot of light at the end of the tunnel for the injuries. And you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's not like I'm sitting around on a game-to-game basis feeling like, well, gosh, if we could just get this guy going, or if we could get this guy back, or if we would just do this one thing a little bit better, I can still see the Final Four potential for this team. Like, no, even when everything's breaking right, I don't see the Final Four potential for this team, quite frankly. And that's why I said, man, I think that for a couple of months now, I've felt like I kind of had this team pegged of what they were, and I think the wins and losses since then have somewhat supported that. And they're going to have a couple good wins. Like, it's not going to shock me if they turn around and win 2 or 3 of these next 4. Just like they lost a couple of these last, they lost the last 3. Like there's not a game on the schedule that I don't think they can win, but there's also not a game on their schedule that I don't think they can lose. And you just kind of hope you find a couple in there to right the ship a little bit going into Nashville. Then maybe you can find a way to win 1 or 2 down there and at least kind of get some belief, not just from the fan base, but obviously within the locker room, most importantly for those guys, that you are at least capable of winning some games, beating some good teams, and going and at least making a little bit of noise, or it being a tough out, if nothing else, for some people in March Madness.
Did you think about, losing to Florida, and then Georgia comes in, and that's a game where they're limping in. They're, losing however many they had lost in a row coming in. That's a game where you pounce on them, protect home like you're supposed to, don't give them life, and you get right. And then instead, Kentucky gives them CPR and revitalizes their seat. They're like, oh yeah, we just won in Rupp, and that's just kind of, don't have the killer instinct when you need it, the ability to knock out somebody when you got them on the ropes, and it's just, like you said, frustrating and inconsistent at the very beginning. In a nutshell.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and to that point, one of the things I've been waiting to see from this team, and probably the only time we've even seen it at all, is the game at Arkansas, quite frankly. And that's what Kentucky's had, all of these impressive comebacks where they're down 12, down 15, and get themselves either in a position to win, or several of them they end up that they do win. And that shows some real explosiveness as a team. Like, it's not easy to come back in a half from being 15 down, from being 18 down, from being 12 points down, what they've done in some of these games. But what I wanted to see to kind of prove that they're a team that can make some noise in March, or could beat a 1 or a 2 seed at some point, is I wanted to see them strike first at some point. This Kentucky team has always responded, and there's something to be said for responding. Like, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but man, like, if we could see them, especially like at home against Vandy coming up, or at home against Florida coming up, like, I think the way that you pull off an upset and beat one of those teams, like, you, instead of waiting until you're down 15 to make your 15-point run, let's be the ones that get up on them by 15, and like, let's have it be 30-15 at the under 8-minute timeout, or let's get up 44-28 at halftime. And like, yeah, instead of it always having to be this miraculous second half comeback, how about let's see us deliver the first haymaker, and then see if we can hold on for dear life from that at that point. But that's been the one thing I've kind of been disappointed in, is that we've for all the second half adjustments and improvements that we've seen, we've never shown the ability really to throw that strike first, and that we're running out of opportunities to show that ability, obviously.
Amen. Just, we can get punched in the mouth and take punches exactly, but we don't punch in the mouth first until we've taken some haymakers upside the head. You're exactly right. You're exactly right, man. That is 100%. We had a person on Twitter tweet in, Drew Dyful from Lexington says, Ramsey brings the context when the temperature gets high. Always worth to listen. So he just,
there we go. Appreciate that.
Brandon Ramsey with the perspective and objectivity to, even when things are all over the place, staying even keeled, man. Staying even keeled. Um, Coaching question. I've noticed this. I've been dying to ask you when I knew we were going to have you on. I'm not nitpicking. It's just something I always notice. If I notice it, surely to God, I know you have being a coach. Colin Chandler, look, he had an off game. He's been in a nice groove, been in a nice rhythm for a while. So, like you say, those unforced turnovers and stuff was out of character. Maybe it was just a one time thing, and kind of get back on stride. But watching Colin, to me, and I don't know if you see it, nobody respects his jab step. He gets it. He loves to be on that wing, especially on the right wing. Sometimes he'll jab and they don't react, they don't bite. And we know, you dude's got a good first step. You got to you kind of honor that. We know he can shoot. To me, you may completely disagree. He needs to just go hard right. One dribble pull up, two dribble pull up, all the way to the rim, whatever. But just do that a few times. And then when you do that jab step, guys are going to have to, whoa. But to me, I don't know if I missed it. I've seen him do a jab step several times, and dudes don't even react to it. I don't know if you've noticed that as well in watching him.
Yeah, I think that some of that might come from him not being the most confident with his handle. I think he's a good ball handler, but obviously he's not a great ball handler by any means, especially if he has to change direction a bunch. But I completely agree. I think that for him to add in that pull up jump shot, it's something that he should be pretty proficient at, because obviously we see his percentages from 3-point range. If you can shoot 41, 42% from 3-point range, you should be a pretty darn good, 12 to 18 foot jump shooter. And then also, he's a really explosive athlete. Like he can,
Yeah.
with his vertical leap and the way that he can explode off the floor, and he's 6'4", 6'5", like he can get some clean looks that way. So yeah, I think if he can actually make them honor that jab step, I think quite frankly now they're not honoring the jab step because he never. It's always a jab step. It's not
Right.
actually ever a one step to get somewhere. So
Yeah.
they know they don't have to worry about it. And I think that, okay, yeah, if you're not confident enough yet in your handle and maybe physically you're not as comfortable to get all the way to the rim, then yeah, like let's get to that mid-range jump shot and rise up and shoot it over some people, because you're obviously a smooth shooter and an excellent athlete. So I think those shots should be able to be pretty high percentage for him. And whether it's a confidence thing or whatever it may be, I agree. I think not only would it help him get some of those shots, but as you were alluding to, it then helps you open up more threes, because now when you do bring that jab step after you've done it a couple of times, now they're going to bounce back a little bit, and then you can pull up and go ahead and bang in the three. But yeah, he needs to make sure that he continues to expand his game, so he's not kind of just the one trick catch and shoot pony from 3-point range. And that's a really good one trick to have if you're going to have one trick. But if he wants to ultimately make the leap to being an all SEC player or playing in the NBA someday, whatever it is, then obviously he's going to have to continue to expand his game further on the offensive end.
Just go hard right a couple times. And to your point, like you said, guys aren't reacting to it. If he went hard right, it's going to be there. He's going to turn the corner because they're not expecting him to do it. And next thing you know, he's around the dude. And then, there's help. You can kick it out. You can dish. Or you can take that little mid-range because, the big isn't over there yet. And you've already beat your defender. Just a couple times go hard right. And it'll open that up for him, I think. And so, like you said, it's just another layer that you can add to the game. And going back to what you said about, just punching first, be up 44-28 at the half against these teams. And then if you got to hang on, fine. But, hanging on beats having to claw back and climb every single time. Talking to these guys, but Tony Depp was a co-host on this podcast for a year. Had Derek Anderson on, Cameron Mills, all those 96 guys that played with Pope. And it was always pedal to the metal. We're up 10. These next 5 minutes, let's get it up to 15. Let's get up to 20. The 96 team, arguably one of the best teams ever. it was like never satisfied. They've all said the same thing, and then it came from, of course, Patino, and they felt the same thing on the court as a team. Whatever if it's 20, let's get it to 25. It's 25, let's get it to 30. Let's just keep pounding. And so Mark Pope, he was in all that culture. He was in all of that. So he knows that mentality or played in that mentality. So to see these first half deficits continue is kind of odd, or haven't figured out how to get out of the gate quicker, and let's let us punch you in the mouth and see how you like it,
Yeah, well, and I think going off of that, like even more than just punching first and getting up big. I mean, you think back to the Auburn game is a perfect example. You get up 9 early in the second half, and like what you're talking about. Imagine if you have one more punch and you get it to 15. Like, well, if you go from 9 to 15, all of a sudden it's pretty hard to lose that game with 15 minutes to go or whatever. And Auburn starts to feel like, here we go again, 6 straight loss coming, all this stuff. But like instead, it always seems like they have a run quickly. It was like 30 seconds and it's back down to 5, and then pretty soon it's a 2-point game and it's tied. Like Kentucky just hasn't in some of the games where there aren't the huge swings one way or another. There still was an inability to sort of really take that next step and put some people away, and we saw that even in the first half against Georgia. I think Kentucky got up 8 or 9 points there as well, and then it's like you just kind of start playing with your food a little bit, and the substitutions come in and all this different stuff, and it's like, man, like if you get that to 12, if you get that to 15, you feel a heck of a lot different than you do if you are up 9 and then all of a sudden, boom, here it's 3, whatever. And I think some of it, again, it just kind of is who Kentucky is at this point. I don't know if they have that gear in them to really punch up and take that next step. But you're absolutely right. It's an issue. It's why that they are. It's why they're 17-10 and not better than they are. They just they haven't shown that ability to punch first, and they haven't shown that ability to extend leads when you kind of have a chance to step on somebody's throat.
Mm-hmm. Nobody says Patino would have made them swim at concrete shoes. That's why they were always wanting to enter the league. And we talked with Anthony Epps. Down 31 at LSU, the fear and dread of that next day's practice played a key role in them coming back in that Mardi Gras miracle. Then the next year they go to LSU and score 86 points in a half, or 2 years after that, they score 86 points in the first half, and they think fondly of that because Patino had nothing to say at halftime critically. Because you just dropped 86 on the squad in 20 minutes. He had nothing to critique, nothing to so that's that constant just drive into to be great was awesome with that team. This is kind of Chandler is Gen X Rex. He could be, with the athleticism, the ability to shoot, to get to the rim. We saw the dunk against Nichols. So he can be that 3-level guy, but he said we missed enough layups already. We're not asking Chandler to get to the rim and lay it up, but take the mid-range or the 3, just get past your man, and then you got a 12, 15-footer right there. We've seen him when he gets to the rim, if he can actually throw it down and finish. So the Rex comparisons could be there. He's got that potential. I remember everybody was saying that about Tyler Hero, and I was like, no, he's not Rex. He's not, because he was, I think, in the dunk contest at Madness, and he had the Rex jersey, and I was like, no, this ain't it, dude. But Chandler could channel some Rex for sure. Can you tell everybody about where they can find your work and plug all your stuff and all the places where you drop knowledge and insights, man, Brandon?
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at Ramsey KSR. All the written work goes on KentuckySportsRadio.com. Also have a YouTube show on the Kentucky Sports Radio YouTube channel. So go subscribe there. Also have my own YouTube channel, the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show. So you can subscribe there as well. And again, all that gets promoted through my Twitter at BRamseyKSR.
All right. Well, good stuff, man. I appreciate you taking a few minutes to hop on and talk about these cats. At South Carolina tomorrow. I mean, anything's possible at this point, right? As far as what to expect.
Yeah. It's like I said, there's not a game that I don't think they can win. There's not a game I don't think they can lose. On paper, at South Carolina is obviously the best chance to win one. They are arguably the weakest team in the Southeastern Conference. Going on the road is always more difficult, obviously, than playing at Rupp. But I think Kentucky is certainly better than them, and we'll just have to see if they can find a way to win. Because I mean, if you don't win this one, things start to get pretty. It's going to be very negative.
Yeah,
going into these final few games because you're going to be underdogs on the rest of them. Again, doesn't mean you can't win them, but you're not going to be expected to win them necessarily, and things get pretty hairy. I think if you lose this one at South Carolina, so hopefully they can right the ship there, and then you get 2 of the last 3 at home. I know they're all against very good teams, but maybe you can find a way to pull out 1 or 2 more and get a little bit of momentum at least going into the postseason play.
Yeah, and we just saw them exactly put up 97 on Mississippi State, so they're riding high. They've had a rough season, but they're feeling good about themselves, and they always get up for Kentucky and Columbia, especially. So we've seen better teams than this Kentucky team go down there and struggle.
That's for sure.
Columbia. So, one last thing I want to ask you too, as an assistant coach, or if you were a head coach, the substitution patterns have gotten a lot of talk and conversation. What would you do differently? Yeah, we know 3 guys are out, but how would you handle the minutes and the substitution? Are you a big fatigue factor guy? Would you play guys more? How would you handle the 200 minutes every game that you get?
Yeah, I think it at this point, and especially when you're talking about injuries or when we're talking about substitutions, I do think the injuries matter. Like, if you had 2 or 3 more guys, it allows the rotations to work a lot differently. But especially at this point in the season, yeah, I am very much a believer of like you just got to play these guys as much as they can possibly play. I get it. Like the fatigue factor is real. Like, I mean, imagine the amount of expectations we're putting on Otega Oweh every game to bring it, score 28, 29 points to guard the other team's best player at times. Like there's a lot on him. And I am sure once he plays 34, 35, 36 minutes that he is tired. And I'm sure that there are times where that impacts his play. But to me, the only thing that matters is a tired Otega Oweh still better than your next option? Like until that pendulum swings, like I don't really care if he's, even if his play is suffering because he's tired. And again, I don't question that it probably does at times, but I'm not so sure that that's not still better than whatever you have to bring into the game. And I think that, I mean, with Chandler, Aberdeen, and Oweh, like those guys probably need to play, 36 plus minutes the rest of the way with pretty much just having Jasper as their backup. The front court's a little bit different story. You have a little bit more natural rotation with Yelovich and Mo, and then Moreno and BG. But yeah, it's tough because you kind of been backed into this corner where your depth has sort of eroded, and you just have these 8 or 9 guys to play. But yeah, I quite frankly at this point in the season, I'm not overly concerned about the fatigue and all that. I want these guys to play through it, and I want my best players on the court as much as we can get them.
Yeah, and I hate to feel like you're just crushing people, but we heard Pope talk about second year guys, the leaps, the progress, and we're seeing Chandler get in that nice groove and come along. BG year 2, if we could have a little more of anything, that would help. Outside of Oklahoma, we don't really. If everybody had OU on their jersey, maybe we.
Right. Yeah, that's what we need to do, man.
Oh man, yeah, and that was my question or concern even at the start of the season, because I'm like, we're expecting him
Right.
to step into the Amari role and facilitate and get dimes and be rugged and be an enforcer and be that dude in the middle. And I didn't see it over the summer. I just did. I'm like, this is gonna be a big leap. Is what I'm saying. And it just, because there were times last year I'm like, what is he looking at? I mean, like Kobe Bryant is right here. Give him the ball. And like, why are you holding and not giving it to the 50% 3-point shooter who's right here wide open? Pass him the ball and let him shoot. And he would just hold it. And so, I mean, we've all seen it. And
yeah,
it goes back to the big frustrating thing. But man, that would have been nice if you got a jump. Like I'm sure Pope he would have gotten
right
from BG, even though he still rolls him out there.
Still rolling with him, that's for sure.
But Brandon, we'll all be tuned in tomorrow to see what we get from the Cats in Columbia. Appreciate you so much for your insights. It's nice to meet you virtually. Appreciate everything you do, written wise, YouTube wise, Twitter wise, all the insights that you give BBN and fans and the coaching perspective that you have, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, good conversation. Enjoyed being here.
Thank you much. For Brandon Ramsey, my name is Vinny Hardy. We'll get Cole back on the next episode. Another episode of Believe in Kentucky. Hit that like, rate, review, and subscribe button. Go Cats, and we'll see everybody next time.